Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you. Hello, Denver. Hello, homeschoolers. I am really sorry that I can't be live because, and you guys are all, you have teenagers. We're talking about teens. I still have some teens at home, and one of my teenage boys is in a jiu-jitsu competition this weekend. In fact, while we're talking, so I have to be at that competition. So thank you for understanding and letting me come to you virtually. My name is Layla. I have hopefully been introduced. I think I have. I've written a few books. Two of them in particular might be of interest to the homeschoolers. One is called Raising Chaste Catholic Men, and basically it's a conversation between me and other moms on how to help facilitate chastity in your boys. Again, not discounting the men. The men are very, very important in this, but we women can have something to say as well. I have 6 boys and 2 girls, and 5 of them are adults and 3 are still minors. My youngest is 12. My oldest is 30. I have more than a dozen grandchildren at this point, and living here in Phoenix, Arizona. And my second book, which will more kind of touch upon certain themes in that book, is called Made This Way. And I wrote that with Trent Horn of Catholic Answers. And there's really nothing else out there that covers kind of how to discuss the really tough moral issues that are out there in the culture today with your children. We do both small children. We tell you how to talk to your small children about those issues. And they're 10 of the hot button kind of connected to human sexuality issues, and then we have sections just on how to talk to your teenagers about those issues. And so it is very difficult, as you know, to talk about teenagers today about these types of things. So I will probably be doing this in 2 parts. So there might be a time change and a costume change or a clothes change somewhere in the middle here. So just bear with me. I ask the Blessed Mother, please, to be with us right now together, that we may open our hearts and minds to what the Lord is asking as far as raising teenagers in this very difficult culture. So please, Mary, be with us. And I'm going to start out by, again, bear with me, I'm going to start out with some foundational things that will make your life easier. And we've got to go back to these basics, these first principles. Once we do that, then we can move into the next segue, which is going to be how to talk to teens. And that's probably where I'll cut the video and then start the second part. But this part cannot be ignored. It really has to be learned, because no one ever taught us this stuff. Maybe some of you guys know this, and if you do, praise the Lord, because I was very poorly catechized myself. And I was a revert in my late 20s. And that was about 27 years ago or so, and I'm still learning every single day. So I'm going to get right to the point, and I'm also, so that I don't ramble, because I tend to do that, I am going to be checking my script here occasionally so I don't get off task. So thanks for bearing with me. We have a major crisis of truth in society, and it is wreaking havoc with all of us, and it's especially wreaking havoc with our children. Since I started raising my children in 1991, the whole culture has shifted. As you may know, those first years of when I was raising a child in the 90s, into the early 2000s, there wasn't really any push for putting LGBTQ, homosexual, transgender stuff in children's content, in schools, in libraries, in books, and preschool shows. And then somewhere along the line, it started to switch. And then, of course, 2015 was the gay marriage ruling from the Supreme Court. And immediately after that started the transgender push. So we've seen a lot accelerating in the past few years, and now our kids are completely immersed in this gender ideology, and that's really, I think, the most difficult thing that we face right now as parents. So we're in this culture which is a full-on self-inflicted chaos, and parents, including Catholic parents, are very afraid. They're very afraid of what's happening. And they don't have confidence. And so what I'm trying to do here is to give you some confidence, because none of this is brain surgery. This is not complicated stuff. God made us a certain way. He hardwired us a certain way, and he hardwired your kids a certain way, and that's what we're going to go with. Let me just make sure that I'm okay. Truth itself is now looking to be obscured by the culture. In fact, we don't even believe in truth. We have to understand that truth means what is real. So we are supposed to be truth seekers. We don't make the truth. God makes the truth. He makes it so it's kind of obvious too. And then we are designed to seek the truth, find the truth with our use of our reason, and then adapt our lives to that truth. We conform to the truth. We don't expect exterior world to conform to us, to our subjective feelings or desires. So before we talk about what that truth is so we can help our children and our grandchildren in some cases, let's go to the basic principle that we never hear about that can make us operate out of a place of calm, not out of a place of franticness or fear or discouragement. So the servant of God, Father John Hardon, who was a wonderful person, a wonderful priest, he has a book called Retreat with the Lord, a popular guide to the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius of Loyola. And I found something that was so foundational in this book that it's changed how I look at everything. He says on page 99, peace, because we're all looking for peace, right? We want peace. We need peace. This world is just so chaotic. Our children need peace. Our teenagers need peace. Peace, he says, is the tranquility of order. Immediately, I'm still quoting here until the end, immediately we must distinguish peace of mind from peace of heart. Peace of mind is the experience of knowing the truth. Peace of heart is the experience of doing God's will. This is key. I'm still quoting Father Hardon. There can be no peace of heart until there is first peace of mind. I must know the truth before I can choose the true good, which is what God wants me to do. He wants us to choose the good, but we can't do it unless we know. So knowing comes first, doing the will of God comes next, and that is what will bring us peace. Peace here brings us peace here. Totally brilliant. Truth. What do we know in our minds? We know truth. So can you see why we have so many souls in pain and so many people having no peace? They are doing without first knowing. And what they're doing is they're doing things based on their feelings. So quick examples. If I don't know what marriage is, if I don't know objectively what marriage is, but I only act according to how I feel, then how will I find peace in marriage? And if I don't know that God made male and female to be different and complementary to one another, then how will I know how to be a woman relating to a man? If I don't know that human life is sacred, inviolable, and made in God's own image and likeness, then how will I know that abortion or IVF or assisted suicide are intrinsically evil? If I don't know about redemptive suffering and the 3 stages of holiness, then how will I find peace and even joy in the crosses that I am given? And we are all given crosses. We're all going to get very heavy crosses. Lately, I think we've all been getting even heavier crosses than we ever imagined. So if I don't know, again in my head, if I don't know basic Catholic doctrine, how will I avoid falling for lies that lead to darkness? And that's the trap for your children, for your teens as well. They have to know the truth before they can have the peace to know what to do. So first we seek and find the truth in our minds, and then we conform our lives to what we now know. I must know the truth before I can choose the true good. Peace of mind comes before peace of heart. Yes, I'm reiterating, but we need to hear these things again and again and again because they're first principles. They're basic things. Okay, so another thing when it comes to truth, again, a foundational first principle. How do we know the truth? How do we know the truth of God's created order? Because all truth comes from God. He is truth. He created everything we see. He created the material world. How do we know the truth of God's created order? So once we know that, if we know that, we can know what to do from there. So this is explosive. Knowing God's created order, knowing the truth, gives us the key to everything. The key to heaven, the key to living in peace, living a good life, and living without this chaos that we feel all around us. So God gives us all of this in the creation story. I know I used to be like, oh, it's so boring, like the creation story, yeah, Adam and Eve, and everything is there that you need to know. And it seems to me, because I like things distilled down to their most simple, easy to understand, and logical foundations. It seems to me, as I've looked at this, and maybe this will help you too, that 3 things happened in the Garden of Eden, specifically concerning human beings, human life. And those 3 things can help us understand what's going on in the culture today and help us straighten out our teens and to raise them with right order. He made us, of course, in his image and likeness. The first thing that he established to make us human beings in his image and likeness is he created human life. Okay, that seems pretty obvious. Life. Okay, life is the very first thing he created for humans in humanity. It's basic. It's inherent to being human. It seems obvious, but we have to say it out loud. And it makes sense then that Satan, that ancient serpent, from the beginning wanted to destroy human life. Okay, first thing God created, first thing God wants to destroy, life. So he convinced us through the years and through many different ways, but in our culture, he's convinced us to bring abortion to our land. And so that's not just wiping out life that was created by God, but it's specifically wiping out innocent human life by the millions and convincing us to pronounce that that evil is good. So he's got that. He's got that done. Check. Negate human life. The second thing he created in the garden, or one of the 3 things he created, was marriage. So marriage is the very first human relational thing that God created in the garden. The first humans, the first people, were a married couple from the get-go. And again, it seems obvious, but we need to say that out loud. And it makes sense that Satan would want to destroy the good of marriage. He convinced us that the essentials of marriage, namely its very nature, as permanent till death, procreative, or fruitful, and conjugal, meaning intercourse, you have male-female relations, marital relations. Satan wants to make all that rejected, because those are the essences of what is reality of marriage as God created it. So what do we have? In our culture, we have divorce, we have contraception and sterilization, and we have gay marriage. So all of those 3 things correlated to the goods, they undid them, and they accomplished the negation of the true nature of marriage. So now we pronounce those evils as good. We see them as good. So negate and destroy marriage, check. Okay, so he's destroyed life, had us agree to destroy life, agree to destroy marriage. So what's next? I think you guys could probably guess. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is he created us male and female. That's our nature. We are either male or we are female. And I won't even get into the idea of an intersex person. That would be a conjugal, that would be a congenital genetic problem from birth, just like if someone's born without an arm or without a leg. It's not how God created things. So even people who are intersex and have an actual physical issue where they might have some characteristics of both male and female in their reproductive organs, science can tell which is dominant. And so whether that person is actually a male or female, you just do a few more invasive, more in-depth tests. So, but what God created in its order was male and female. That's very basic in the creation story. And so basic, in fact, and so clear to all cultures in all times and places that it's perhaps the most obvious thing of all. Every culture and even atheist cultures, and male and female. So it makes sense that Satan would want to destroy that's in our very nature, the very nature of male and female. Now that's the hardest thing actually to get through to people because it is so obvious. As my friend and a really good writer, actually, I can't call him a friend, he's an acquaintance, but he's just a wonderful writer. I look up to him. Anthony Esolen, he has said that sex, male or female, is the first thing we notice about a person, and it's the last thing that we forget. So basically, if you talk to a clerk at a store, you may not remember what that person is wearing. You may not remember the exact color of their hair or their eyes or the length of their hair or whatever. But you will remember whether you talk to a boy or a girl, a man or a woman. You'll say, yeah, I talked to this guy at the store and he was this and she was that or whatever. It's so basic to us. And I always say this too. I think I'm going off on a tangent here. But in The Passion of the Christ, Mel Gibson made the Satan figure androgynous. Why? Well, I think we all, if we've seen that movie, we get very, very unsettled when we see the Satan figure being androgynous. We don't know exactly if we're seeing male or female, and that's by design. The human body, the human person is unsettled by androgyny, by not knowing whether this person is a male or a female. It should be unsettling. It's supposed to be unsettling because we were made in the image of God as a male or as a female, and they are not the same. So Satan saved that one for last, because if he could get us to fall for the negating of life and marriage, then convincing us to deny and erase our very natures as male and female comes much more easily. So now we've destroyed and negated male and female. Check. So with this final blow, the annihilation of all humanness, all essences and relationships that God created with humans in the garden can be complete. And then the question is, but what's Satan's goal in that? Why would he want to do this? What's he accomplishing with the creation negation? Because after all, even though we've been diabolically convinced that we need and require abortion, divorce, contraception, gay marriage, and gender fluidity as human rights, we still think of ourselves as enlightened and progressive and humanistic. But it's incredibly straightforward what Satan was trying to do. It's about killing the fatherhood of God. If you can kill the fatherhood of God among human beings, then you sever our relationship with God the Father. And then we don't go to heaven. We go to hell. And that's what Satan wants. And Saint Pope John Paul II, gives us a clear insight into this in his book, Crossing the Threshold of Hope. He said, quote, "This is truly the key for interpreting reality. Original sin, then, attempts to abolish fatherhood." The devil, and that's end quote. And it's been wildly successful. He's done a great job. Satan has done a great job of this. If you erase life, then you erase fatherhood. If you erase marriage, you erase fatherhood. If you erase the distinction between male and female, you erase fatherhood. It's genius, really. It's an evil genius. We sever our relationship with God as Father, and we lose our life of grace and our home in heaven. So to the extent that we buy into this plan, by agreeing to a distortion or a compromise on life, marriage, or the integrity of the sexes, we advance the plan of the devil, and we contribute to ours and others' eternal destruction. So watch for those snares. It all goes back to the garden. So what does this have to do with our teens? Everything. As I mentioned, the kids are being corrupted by the culture, and they don't even know the basics. And we don't even know the basics. This is super important for anyone who has teenagers. This entire generation has been taught, contrary to what has come before in again, 2,000 years of Christianity and in the history of Western civilization, they have been taught to find truth by whatever their feelings are telling them. Okay, so truth through feelings. That's a completely backwards, upside down, and it is a disaster. It's a recipe for disaster. If you've ever tried to discover truth through what you feel, you're going to have a different truth every day. Women especially, we know this. We feel something different every single day. We know we feel differently when we're children or as adults, when we're cold versus comfortable, when we're suffering versus happy. We're going to have a different feeling. We cannot base our finding of truth, our determination of what is true, and thus how we should act, based on how we feel. It's completely wrong-headed. But that is the entire culture of young people today. They truly believe and have been taught that that's how we get to the facts. That's how we get to what is true and real for them. But we know that truth is objective. Truth has not, if I never lived at all, truth would still be the same. It would be how God created things. It would be what exists in reality, irrespective of what I feel about it. So I could hate the fact that marriage is about one man and one woman. I could want to go and, there's all sorts of cute neighbors that I may like. That may be my nature. Like I kind of want to go, be with other people. It doesn't matter what I feel. The truth is the truth. It's how God created things. And that's how young people have not been taught to think. So try debating someone by using feelings and see how far you get. So what could go wrong, right? We've got this whole generation that's morally confused and affecting their Catholic formation and their ability to see and know God and to serve God in truth. So there's a story I'll tell you about a teenage girl who's in college, and her mom called me kind of upset and frantic, wanting me to talk to this girl because she had gone from Catholic faith to like a Pentecostal church or something in college, and she was out of state, and she just loved this new church because it was very much feeding her emotions. She was feeling something that she hadn't felt by going to a Catholic church for Mass. And so I spent quite a bit of time on the phone, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours with this sweet young woman and her mom. And one thing that I noticed was that she prefaced a lot of her statements. I was giving her really good objective apologetics on how to approach what is true. We have to find out who Christ was and what he said, and then what did the early church say, and how does that fit in with what Scripture says, and how do we know that this is true through history, Scripture, logic, all of this. And everything she came back with was, oh, okay, yeah, but I feel, and she would preface her statements with, I feel. And after a while, I kind of pointed that out to her. I said, I want you to stop and think for just a second. You keep saying, I feel. How about if we come back to, I know, or I believe this or that because of this fact or this truth. And she thought, okay, and I think it was kind of foreign to her, but she thought that would be okay. And then picked right back up for the rest of the conversation with, I feel. So she really felt like people going to Mass didn't get anything out of it because she didn't, because it seemed boring and it seemed like people didn't love God. And I reminded her that sometimes reverence is very quiet. Sometimes the interior life is on fire, but it's very quiet. And she didn't quite understand that, because in her church that she's going to now, it was very much like people, she just kept saying that it's just so joyful and everybody's just singing and so it was based on this kind of external display of emotion. And so we're dealing with an entire generation of that, and you have to somehow learn to counter that. And even in our own selves, I know a lot of people still feel that way. So we as a Catholic Church have been poorly forming people for about 50 years now. Ask me how I know. I mean, I was catechized in the 70s and 80s. But up until just a few decades ago, the church and the culture were working more or less in tandem in upholding the norms of morality. And when sinners, back in the day, as always, they broke the norms of morality in the culture, the moral code, but the cultural norms would compensate for sinners. For example, and I will say that the peer pressure at that time was to be good. The peer pressure was, to be virtuous, to do your duty, to have some honor, and not just do whatever you felt like. So for one example, if a child back in the day suffered the trauma of his parents' divorce, which was then uncommon, then that child would still get to see the norm of lifelong marriage all around him in the culture, in his neighborhood, in his school, in the movies, in TV shows, in books, and of course in the church. The norms of morality were still seen as important and necessary by virtually everyone in society, even non-religious folks, in order to raise up productive, stable, functioning, healthy citizens. So those norms of morality actually worked. There was sense and reason and order. We go back to that word order. Order is like my favorite words. People say right and wrong. I like to sometimes just say ordered and disordered. It kind of makes a little more sense when you'll understand why in the second half of this talk. And so we did that as a church, and we did that as a society. Now, sadly, those foundational moral imperatives were blown all to bits in the 1960s with the sexual revolution, and all that was thrown out the window. moral relativism came in, objective morality was seen as old-fashioned, and it became a relativistic, subjective society based on feelings and desires. There's a quote, "A society can survive its citizens doing evil, but a society cannot survive its citizens calling evil good." So you might have had some citizens who did evil things, but now we have a society where we're calling those evil things good. And you can see that with all the the drag shows for young children and the Blue's Clues video for preschoolers showing every type of sexual perversion and deviancy that you can for minutes on end in a gay pride parade for 4-year-olds. I blogged about that. I cannot believe it, but that's where we are. So we're calling everything. We're calling abortion good, divorce good, IVF, all the, immodesty, gender ideology, all that stuff we're calling it good. Homosexual marriage, homosexuality, all of it. Good. It's all good. So unfortunately, around the same time that the sexual revolution came through, there was a shift in the way that we taught morality in the church as well. So just when the cultural morality was subjective and relative, the church came in and started teaching things on a more experiential, feelings-based way. Right when we needed to hold that line so that there would be a truth and a foundation that people could find in an increasingly crazy society, we went with the society and we taught in ways that were relative and feelings-based, and we're still kind of doing that. So we jettisoned reason and order, and the effect of this shift has been a few generations of Catholics adrift with very little understanding of or adherence to the moral law. So we haven't taught our children to think and reason because we were never taught to think and reason and to understand right order and the nature of things. So we as a church must bring back things around so that our children once again have a firm, secure foundation and do not succumb as their peers do to the chaos and confusion they see all around them. So then the question becomes, what's the mechanism that we use? We need to return to what is called natural law teaching, and that's where we're going to lay this foundation for the teens. Natural law teaching is our patrimony. It is our tradition. Natural law is another term for the universal moral law of God. The universal moral law of God. It applies to every human being on the planet. It's not just for Catholics. It doesn't require divine revelation for you to understand the moral law. You only need a brain. We can ascertain the truths of the moral law of how human beings should act based on reason alone, the light of human reason alone. Things like the Trinity and the sacraments and the Marian doctrines and the Creed, that required divine revelation straight from God. We couldn't have gotten that on our own. But the moral law is accessible to every atheist, to every Hindu, to every Buddhist, to every Catholic, to every Christian, Protestant. Everyone knows certain things. For example, we don't need supernatural revelation to know that murder is wrong, theft is wrong, cutting people in line is unjust. Everybody knows that instinctively. And we don't need to know, we don't have to have divine revelation to know that feeding the hungry is right, okay? These are things we can get to from reason alone. Your children, your teens can know this. Even if they have started to reject the faith, we can work with them because we know that reason alone suffices. St. Paul said, even the pagans can look at the created order and see the truth. That's in Scripture. We know this. So, natural law, which C.S. Lewis called Tao, T-A-O, I think. It sounds a little Buddhist, so it didn't catch on. But basically, it's the same as natural law. And natural law, I do want to say what it isn't. It is not the laws of nature. It's not science. We're not talking about science like gravity. It may have something to do with that on some level, but we're not talking about science. Natural law is not what comes naturally to me, because really what comes naturally to me is if I pass a plate of cookies, I want to eat the whole thing. Well, that's called gluttony, so that can't be the moral law. So what comes naturally to a person, whether they're homosexual or whatever, that's not the basis of morality. And it's not what animals do in nature, because animals just act on instinct. So whether they eat their young or do things that look homosexual in nature, doesn't matter. They're animals. They don't have the capacity to reason like human beings do. We are made in the image and likeness of God, which means we have an intellect and a will. They do not. They do not. Angels do. We do. So we are moral agents. Moral agents choose good or bad, and animals don't. So it's not what happens in nature. So those things are not natural law. Natural law is the moral law of God that applies to everyone. And natural law asks and answers this question: what is the nature of a thing, and what is its purpose? So what is this thing, and what is it for? We can apply this to humans. What is human life for? What is the nature of a human being? What is the nature of a man, of a woman, of marriage, of human sexuality? And we have many clues and many things that we can look at to see what it is for. What is the purpose, or telos, T-E-L-O-S, of this thing? And these questions and answers are based on God's created order. When we order our lives and our choices correctly, then things make sense, and there is security and peace, and things tend to flourish and thrive, including the human person. When we live against the purpose of a thing, or the order of what was created by God, and our own lives, if we work against the moral law, the universal moral law, we live in disorder. We live sinful lives, and things don't make sense, and we are led to darkness and disaster. Things don't flourish. Things tend to go wrong. So the church has used the natural law to teach since St. Paul, and all the popes of the past have used it. Even the America's founders in the Declaration of Independence, the Abraham Lincoln with slavery, MLK for the civil rights, they all explicitly believed in and used and mentioned God's law, God's natural law, the laws of God's, the laws of nature. Gosh, it's in the, you guys know this probably, it's in the Declaration of Independence, but nature and nature's God. So what those laws are. But MLK literally said a law is only just if it's based on natural law. So you can forego unjust laws, and you can know what those laws are that are unjust based on if it's in compliance with natural law. And he even quotes St. Augustine. This was in his letter from a Birmingham jail. He was in jail protesting unjust laws because they didn't conform to what Augustine knew, what Aquinas knew, and what people like Martin Luther King Jr., who was a Protestant minister, what everybody used to know. So we've jettisoned all that, and we don't talk about it anymore, even in the church. Even the Nuremberg trials, what Hitler did was legal. Everything there was legal according to the man-made laws of Germany. But the Nuremberg trials used natural law and said, you know what? We don't care that your law said you could kill innocent human beings by the millions. The law of God, the natural law, says you can't. So they were convicted on the natural law. So Nuremberg also was based on the natural law. So natural law is universal. We all understand it, but now we're pretending that we don't really understand it and we don't really want it anymore. Okay, Pope Pius XII's first encyclical was written to oppose humanity's, quote, drift towards chaos. Okay, think of how we're doing it now. He blamed that drift towards chaos on the, quote, disregard and the forgetfulness of the natural law itself. Okay? This is basic Catholic stuff. We have to understand the natural law. We have to teach the natural law. Again, it is not brain surgery. It is not rocket science. It's very, very basic, easy stuff. And I'm going to pause here and come back. I may or may not be wearing something. Maybe I'll wear the same thing. I don't know. If I can get this done without my kids running down, I'll get it done. But hopefully we've laid a foundation, and now we're going to talk about how to apply this to teaching our teenagers in very important issues of the day. So I'll be right back.